They called it a power move, a flex, a message to corporate America that labor would not roll over anymore. But when the dust settled on Yellow Corporation in July 2023, 30,000 workers walked away with nothing but a pink slip and a bankruptcy filing. And now, a federal appeals court just handed Yellow's estate a second chance to go after the Teamsters for 137 million, potentially more than 1.5 billion if they can prove what they're claiming. This is not just about a trucking company anymore. This is about whether a union leader can sacrifice an entire company, 30,000 jobs, and billions in shareholder value as a chess move in his own power game. Let me take you back to June 2023. Yellow Corporation, a 99-year-old American trucking institution, was on life support. They had 1.3 billion in debt, including a 700 million pandemic loan from the US Treasury that made American taxpayers the largest shareholders in the company. Yellow needed to restructure. They called it One Yellow, a plan to merge their four separate LTL operating companies, consolidate terminals, and modernize operations so they could compete with non-union carriers who were eating their lunch. Phase 1 worked. The Teamsters agreed to it in 2022, and Yellow hailed it as a success. But Phase 2, that's where Sean O'Brien decided to draw his line in the sand. Here's what you need to understand about Sean O'Brien. He became Teamster's general president in March 2022, riding a wave of militant rhetoric and promises that the days of union concessions were over. This guy's from Boston, comes from a Teamster family going back 4 generations, and he's got a reputation. In 2013, he was literally suspended for threatening other union members. He's the type who tweets pictures of headstones with yellow written on them. He spoke at the Republican National Convention in 2024, the first Teamster president ever to do so, where he thanked Donald Trump for having the backbone to invite him. He's playing both sides, positioning himself as the strong man who won't bend, who won't make concessions, who's willing to burn it all down to prove a point. And burn it down he did. According to Yellow's lawsuit, which a federal appeals court just revived, O'Brien didn't just disagree with Phase 2 of the One Yellow plan. He allegedly told the Teamsters board that the union would not in any way support Yellow's proposed change of operations and would reject up to and including striking any proposals of such. Not negotiate, not compromise, just reject everything. The lawsuit claims O'Brien was willing to let Yellow fail as a show of strength ahead of a bigger negotiations with UPS, which were coming up that summer. Think about that strategy for a second. Sacrifice 30,000 jobs at Yellow to flex your muscles before sitting down with UPS. Yellow filed a lawsuit in June 2023, claiming the Teamsters breached their contract by blocking changes they had no authority to stop. Under the National Master Freight Agreement, Yellow had the right to run their business, merge operations, open and close terminals. The union's role was limited to determining seniority issues for affected workers. But O'Brien was not interested in his lane. He wanted control. Yellow agreed. They tried repeatedly to meet with O'Brien, repeatedly offered to accommodate the union's demands, but he stonewalled them. And here's the kicker. While Yellow was bleeding customers because of the uncertainty O'Brien created, he was out there on social media acting as what the lawsuit called a public agitator for the company's demise. The Teamsters missed a $50 million health benefits payment on July 15, 2023. A strike was threatened for July 24th. That threat alone caused Yellow's freight volumes to drop 80% in 1 week. Customers don't stick around when they think a carrier might shut down any minute. It becomes a death spiral. Less freight means less revenue, which means you can't pay your bills, which means more customers leave. Yellow stopped picking up new freight and shut down operations on July 30th, 2023. 30,000 people lost their jobs, 22,000 of them were Teamsters, the very members O'Brien was supposedly protecting. Now here's where this gets really interesting. The original lawsuit was dismissed in March 2024 by a Kansas district court because Yellow had not followed the internal grievance procedures required by their contract. But the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals just said, hold on a minute. They ruled the lower court made a mistake. There is a legal principle called repudiation. If one party categorically refuses to participate in the process, the other party doesn't have to waste time with procedures that won't work anyway. The appeals court pointed to O'Brien's public statements, his alleged comments to the Teamsters board, his declaration that the union was done making concessions and would go after Yellow with everything we've got. So now the case goes back to district court, where Yellow's estate can file an amended complaint with all the evidence that came out during discovery. And the Teamsters are facing questions they probably didn't want to answer under oath. Like why O'Brien had to be deposed about his conversations with Yellow CEO, which a bankruptcy court recently said are key to Yellow's defense against $244 million in WARN Act claims. The Teamsters fought hard to block O'Brien's deposition. They lost that fight too. Let's talk about what this means. If Yellow's estate prevails, the Teamsters could be on the hook for massive damages. The original lawsuit sought $137 million in lost earnings, plus at least $1.5 billion in lost enterprise value. That's not chump change. That's potentially crippling for the union. But more importantly, this case could set a precedent about how far union leadership can go in wielding power. Can a union president sacrifice an entire company, put 30,000 members out of work, destroy billions in value for taxpayers and shareholders, all to make a point before his next big negotiation? Because let's be clear about what happened with UPS. After Yellow shut down, O'Brien negotiated a new UPS contract in August 2023 that gave workers significant raises. The Teamsters declared it one of the greatest contracts in union history. Some labor analysts have called it a PR stunt, a strike-ready campaign that was never about actually striking, but about creating the appearance of militancy after Yellow's collapse. O'Brien had his trophy. He showed he was willing to let a company die rather than make concessions. And UPS, watching what happened to Yellow, probably thought twice about pushing too hard at the negotiating table. But what about those 30,000 Yellow workers? Some were guys who've been driving trucks for 35, 37, 40 years. They'd already taken pay cuts, pension cuts, benefit concessions over the years to keep Yellow afloat. They did their part, and they showed up to work one day in July 2023 to find their terminals padlocked with a sign saying operations has ceased. No warning, no final paycheck in some cases, and for the ones close to retirement, their pensions were suddenly uncertain. One driver told NPR he'd put in 37 years and knew exactly how much his monthly retirement check would be. Now, he doesn't even know if he can retire. The Teamsters' response to all this? They say Yellow's lawsuit is baseless and that the company was just looking for a scapegoat for decades of mismanagement. They point out Yellow had been in the financial trouble long before O'Brien became president. And they're not wrong. Yellow was struggling. But that's exactly why Yellow needed the restructuring. That's exactly why phase 2 of One Yellow was critical to survival. And that's exactly why O'Brien's refusal to negotiate wasn't just stubbornness. It was a death sentence. Here's what really gets me. O'Brien has positioned himself as this champion of the working class, this fighter who won't back down to corporate America. He spoke at the RNC and rallied against corporate elites who treat workers like squatters. He's launched a podcast where he interviews right-wing politicians. He's cultivated this image of being fearless, independent, willing to work with anyone who'll advance the cause of labor. But when you're the guy who allegedly blocked a restructuring plan that could have saved 30,000 union jobs, including 22,000 of your own members, because you wanted to flex before your next contract negotiation, you're not a champion of workers. You're a politician using workers as pawns. And that's what this lawsuit is really about. It's about whether union leadership can be held accountable when their power plays destroy the very people they're supposed to protect. The federal appeals court just said Yellow deserves a chance to make that case. The Teamsters will fight it, of course. They'll say they were protecting their members from contract violations, from job losses that phase 2 would have caused. But here's the thing. Phase 2 might have cost some jobs through consolidation. Yellow's complete shutdown cost all 30,000 jobs. Every single one. The irony is almost too much. O'Brien wanted to prove the Teamsters would not make concessions anymore. He wanted to show unions have power. And what happened? 30,000 workers lost their jobs. One of America's oldest trucking companies disappeared. Taxpayers lost $700 million and non-union carriers picked up Yellow's market share. If that's what union power looks like in 2023, then maybe we need to redefine power. Because from where I'm sitting, the only thing Sean O'Brien proved is that ideology without pragmatism is just destruction dressed up in militant rhetoric. This case is going to be fascinating to watch. Will Yellow's estate be able to prove O'Brien deliberately tanked the company? Will they show that his refusal to negotiate was about his own power play and not about protecting workers? Or will Teamsters successfully argue that Yellow was doomed anyway and they were just the convenient scapegoat? Either way, 30,000 people are still out of work. An American institution is still dead and Sean O'Brien is still Teamsters president, probably planning his next big power move. Let's just hope that the next one does not cost another 30,000 jobs. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an update. Your support lets me keep bringing you more content just like this. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.